Originally produced by our team at Ingenuity Radio in 2002, Searching for the New Liberalism is a 9-part series adapted for this podcast, The Life of a Servant.
Welcome to Part 5. This segment focuses on the economy and features Dennis Mills, John McCallum, Michael Phelps, Tom Axworthy, and Lorna Marsden.
And it's under the site ingenuitycanada.com. But the most important thing to know is that when you speak, after you make your intervention, whether you see a presenter or in this case, Mr. McCallum, the coordinator of the event, please turn your mouth off because even the shuffling of papers is coming through. That's how good the quality of film making is. So when you're not speaking, please turn off the mic. Thank you. Job of introducing John McCallum, who's already made a small little introduction to this morning. He, of course, before becoming Member of Parliament and Minister of Defence of Canada, one of Canada's most distinguished economists, as the chief economist of the Royal Bank, and before that, Dean of Arts at McGill. And I do want to say, without overly praising, that when we talked this morning about engagement and political parties and people giving up their private realm in order to contribute to the public realm, I think John of the career will certainly exemplifies that. He has one of the most prestigious jobs in the country, and now he's looking around at Afghanistan. So he's an example of what we want, which is engagement. Mr. Minister. Moderator. Thank you very much. I've known Tom quite a lot over the years, and in history, when I was senior arts and he was working for Charles Thompson, and he was trying to get $10 million out of Charles Thompson for Canadian Studies Institute, and party thanks to Tom that. So it's a pleasure for me to be here, kind of back in my natural habitat, you might say, talking about the economy, for at least temporarily, before I get back to airplanes and tanks and things of that nature. I calculated that if every speaker speaks for 20 minutes and every commenter for 10, we'll have 115 minutes, which is 15 minutes more than we have, without anyone else saying anything. So I would ask if the speakers could do their best to limit themselves to, say, 15 minutes and the commentators to 5, and that way we'll have, even with a little slippage, a good amount of time for everybody else. So our first speaker is Michael Phelps, and he gave us permission to say this. He's a living, breathing example of two things. One, that we do have some elections here today. And two, that our sovereignty or Canadian ownership and resources is eroding. Because Michael, until very recently, was the chairman and CEO of West Coast Energy. And recently was sold to some Americans, I believe. So he may or may not look the comment on that. He is also on the share price. I don't know what the share price is. He's also on the board of Asia Pacific Foundation, Concord Corporation, CIGQ, forgiven for that, Canadian Pacific, and the Team Canada Advisory Board. Michael. Thank you very much, Sean. I'm no longer a CEO, but I am a chairman. But were I a CEO, I would feel compelled to point out today that I am an unindicted CEO. A few months ago, I would not have been compelled to draw that to your attention, but the world has changed. I should thank Eugene by thanking Tom for his attention and the opportunity to participate. I should also thank Peter Monk for his generosity in helping the technical structure get established. Reminds me of something I read in the paper on Thursday. It's all about luck and harmony. At Seton Hall University, a Catholic university in New Jersey, there are two kinds of buildings. The first kind is named after saints. So far, so good, no problem. The second category of buildings are named after individuals. Unfortunately, in all three cases, those individuals, summer, there is a possibility of a there are three rules as I understand it, for a successful economy. One is focusing on the future, not threatening. Two is focus on the bigger picture, not the micro focus. And three is we should try to conclude on a note of optimism. I propose to beat all three of those rules and then focus more on threatening. I tend to, without boring you, I hope, comment somewhat on some micro matters and conclude on a note of abject pessimism. So those are the three rules that I hold on. Liberalism, even the search for liberalism, old order, is really about poverty. There are too much elements. It's about poverty. Poverty is about the ability to make choices. So what I'm going to talk about is the role of corporate Canada in helping us to make those choices. There are two tendencies that I propose to advance, but not argue the reasons for them. I'm hoping they'll be honest or well, I'm sure somebody will tell me. Firstly is that private sector corporations will have a vital role, a key role, because of their intellectual and financial capital in helping to create the kind of wealth that's required to sustain. And in fact, without that kind of wealth creation, there is no resistance, let alone new or old liberalism. The other tenet would be simply this. I would argue, and I'm sure as I look around this room, I hope that there wouldn't be much disagreement about it, that somehow or other, Canada being separate is in itself the best interest of our culture. And that if we resist complete integration, political, cultural, economic, with the U.S., we will have a better quality of life in an overall sense where he wanted to find. Now, if there's agreement on those two elements, then it's time to talk about how to do it. And for my particular part in all of this, the role of corporate Canada. So the first note of pessimism is to tell you, and it's not just Canadian, but just to tell you how tough it is in the capital markets today. Once you get a little bit blinded by the relative outperformance of Canada's economy. In a sea of turmoil, the macro numbers at least look quite good in a relative sense. But the reality of the capital markets means we have at least another couple of years of very tough spots. And if you stand back and look at the hit that the economy has taken over the last little while, it's a long list. The tech valuation meltdown, September 11th. Capital markets, I used to joke, are used to dealing with one potential nuclear war at a time. We have three on the go. We have three on the go in the sense of the potential for the Middle East to spill over into something yet next. You would all be aware of how perilously close we came a few weeks ago, almost 2 months ago now, to a real blow-up in the Kashmir. Arguably the most sensitive nuclear spot right now. And then Iraq, and the slow evolution of that as we marching through Georgia, as it were, through the January or February launch date, is the one that seems to be ready for soon. The crisis in corporate confidence, the unremitting list of problems, Enron, Global Crossing, Delphi, World Cycle, even Martha Stewart. Now, all that is noise, that publicity is handled. But it's noise that affects the tone of the market. Without healthy capital markets, without a reduction in volatility, there is not going to be any meaningful recovery anywhere. And we won't have much time to talk about new liberalism or refunding it. What I'm worried about more than anything else, thank you, and not so much the scandal, I worry about the potential threat from otherwise apparently stable blue chip institutions. So if you follow the vagaries of the day-to-day capital market, you would be aware that General Electric is under some form of accounting trial and something to about how they fund short-term debt. You would be aware that even IBM is under a cloud about some elements of its accounting. You would be aware, if you follow this, that the next shoe to drop in the Enron matter are the banks. They have the money to pay for the millions and millions of dollars of losses in stated 401k savings plans and pension plans and shareholder loss. and in particular, three banks to each, and was the likely first set of targets. I don't have to tell you the role of banks in providing financial stability and the wherewithal for the rest of corporate Canada to get on the business of recovery. Now, much of this relates to accounting, but if accounting is under attack, as it is today, nobody trusts any numbers from the bluest of the blue chip companies. So we need to get that fixed, and we need to get that fixed in a hurry. The debt markets are in a lot of turmoil. In my case, I used to owe $7 billion to the bank. Now, what that simply meant was that I could golf anywhere in the world. I did. I think I'm the only man in this room who's played against the strict stuff. And if I owed $6 billion, it would only have been $5. So I know how I got there. But the debt markets are in huge turmoil, about credit quality, about the validity of ratings. And while I would want to stand here and tell you that I represent a fully solvent corporation, let me hurry. If I got a call from the chairman of Moody's or Standard & Poor's, line 1, and on line 2, the Prime Minister was holding, I take line 1. I would take line 1. I know where my bread is buttered or how it gets buttered, and I would start with the rating agencies first, because they're my license to operate. They're my license to think. Now, this is not just a Canadian problem, but we're fully into the thick of it, and it represents a large challenge. Now, if we look forward, if we assume economic recovery, if we assume that most of the scandals are going to be behind us, if we assume that a whole slew of bad habits that we just kind of slip our way into almost unknowingly part of a 9-year boom market and very much of a bull market. So the conflict of interest with the camels and with a whole slew of other characters, if we assume all that gets put behind us, and it appears to be in the middle of being faced, corporate Canada and its ability to play a role in the search for new liberalism still has a host of challenges. And if I was going to leave you with one message here, two messages, there are two things that need to change. One of them is there's a whole slew of relatively arcane rules that affect our ability to compete. Because this is about creating great Canadian corporations, great on any kind of global scale. Because in an economic sense at least, I'd argue that interfering with the flow of capital would be a mistake. And a free flow of capital is what allows companies to be created on a great basis. We have rules in and of themselves don't look like much in terms of creating a disadvantage. But they are. I mean, for instance, on taxes, not the level of tax. Somebody else can argue about that. I think Tom has that in his paper. We have certain tax rules that are very different from American ones. The reality is, it's a huge disadvantage. For instance, no Canadian company can deduct for tax purposes the cost of investing in foreign countries, unless you have stream income that's foreign based. So if you're starting out, the Americans starting out can deduct it. We can't. Now, West Coast became the largest foreign investor in Mexico. We couldn't deduct 1 penny of that. We simply had to say, hey, in the future, we'll wait. But in the meantime, an American competitor would have been earning twice as much because of tax deductibility. So there are kinds of rules like that. Our securities regulation is much less efficient. It costs twice as much to raise $1 capital in Canada than it does in the States. And in part, that's because in the States, trundle down to Washington, make one filing. In Canada, you have to file with 10 securities commissions. It's just, I'm surprised it's only twice as expensive. The lawyers love it, however. I hate to add, as a former Part 3 lawyer, I always have to point that out. Our capital markets are considerably thinner. And thinness makes for evaluation discount. And it's the reality of fact. So to point out, our battle for corporate sovereignty, at least, is a long hurdle. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but it is a long hurdle. It means that if you look at how to get out of this mess, Canada has to look at multilateral solutions. If we try to persuade the Americans to go with our accounting system, we're not going to carry that argument. And in my case, if I had the choice between using American accounting or Canadian accounting, the reality was I picked American accounting. I picked American accounting because it's going to be fully acceptable in Canada and obviously acceptable in the U.S. Because if I resorted only to Canadian accounting, or it might as well have been Greek. The reality is you get forced to that standard in the integrated capital market. And that's, well, let's say that's just the reality. I think that every difference is going to have to be reflected upon. And we strive to be different. We strive to have our own rules. The solution is more of a multilateral one. The only hope for things like accounting and tax are to work in a multilateral setting and try to persuade other countries that that's the way to go. So that represents a bit of a challenge if the Americans are going to ignore whatever consensus emerges. I think the Canadian government, mostly federal, are going to have to resume the habit of backing champions. Uncertain track record, uneven track record. But at the end of the day, government sponsorship of certain companies is going to be absolutely required to allow for a leveling of the playing field. The last thing, and the last point I'll leave you with, and hopefully I'm right on 15 minutes or close to it, there's one other thing that has to change, and it's what I would describe as the cult of shareholder value. When I started as a CEO 15 or so years ago, shareholder value was important. And literally, I probably heard from shareholders, institutional shareholders, twice a year. And no more than that. The world has changed. The world has changed. And I was fully permitted to recognize that my employees, the communities, even customers, were as important as shareholders. Over the course of these 15 years, that changed completely. It changed in part because interest rates were so low. Everybody gets tired of 2% levels of interest rates for deposits. Everybody in this room, starts to look for returns from equity. My point here is this is us doing it to us. This is not somebody in Zurich or Wall Street or Bay Street. This is us. It's you who wants to go to New York and back for $199 by year. But you want a fully maintained haircut and a very nice meal. But you don't want to pay more than $199. It's you saying to your mutual funds, whomsoever, your insurance company, your pension fund, I want 15 or 20% annual return. Those institutions seem to turn around and say, we want those kinds of returns out of you, the company. It means that, and I think that's to pick up on Don's point, why that Phelps is a classic example. At the end of the day, an offer came along that was very attractive. And I consulted with the owners of the company, the large institutional shareholders. Most of whom are public and fiduciary. Ontario teachers, Ontario municipal employees, or BC hospitals, or whatsoever. They were very quick to point out, we like this price. We don't care if the buyer is from Swaziland. We like this price. Take it. Now that's fine, and it's a free economic choice. But at the end of the day, a $15 billion Canadian enterprise has control. And I guess that's the Darwinian economics law. But if that's the change, the owners need to change. And particularly the fiduciary institutions need to come forward and say, no, we want the other factors to be reckoned with. And the last thing I will say is, as somebody who deals every day with the United States, we mustn't ever forget our strength. There's only one area where I see in the bilateral relationship where the Americans are really paid about, and that's flow of energy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael, for that somewhat depressing now speech. I continue to relate to the shareholder value thing because it mentioned in my 6 years at Royal Bank for Alan Taylor, who left in 94. Shareholders you just wanted more important stakeholders, and for John Paycorn, who came in, they were the only important group. So I saw the same thing. Now, the next speaker is Tom Axworthy, and I realize now why he gave me a nice introduction, because I'm now introducing him. And Tom really doesn't need much introduction. He was principal secretary for Pierre Trudeau in the first part of the 80s. He is currently the Monzoon director, executive director of Historica Foundation, which promotes history, including military history. And he never loses any advantage. As well as an adjunct professor at the Kennedy School of Government in Harvard. Talk. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I spoke this morning at the introduction to the elephant stuff
a new liberalism, to look at values and priorities, capacity for how we do things, and then certainty and engagement or support. So I'm going to address all three in the very brief time available to me in a quick summary. And I want to begin with the values that have been typically used by many, almost, I think, all of you. Okay? Lloyd referred to strength of the fighter. And that is that for liberals, for people of our particular ideological orientation, choice is the absolute most important value because it's the necessary condition for people to find what is the good in their own life. And therefore, liberals, in the time when Aristotle first said that choice was the primary value because he used them, his fellow citizens and Athens to define the good life, through the long history of liberalism that John Robertson talked about. In differing ways, liberal thinkers have thought on how choice could be extended. Choice in politics, in freedom, in relative liberty. In the 20th century, he added to it the opportunity to exercise that choice. And therefore, it is the whole social event of liberalism. So, my paper on the relationship with the United States over the next several decades was through the prism of choice. How do we continue to have real choices ourselves? How do we, as best we can in this generation, try to guarantee choice for our children and our grandchildren so they too can have choices? Now, as we apply that thing, President Moore will be talking about social policy, and I'd say that the Canadians, the greatest number of Canadians, in my view, who have diminishing choices, are poor children, 1.3 million of them. The Canadians who have the least amount of choice, who have the greatest aggregation of obstacles, are Aboriginal. So through that value frame of choice, it applies to a host of areas that we're looking at, but I applied it to our relationship in sharing North America, the superpower or the hyperpower. Now, my paper was divided in half on foreign policy, international relations, and domestic issues. And I'll spend time on the domestic agenda, the economic agenda, but I will say this, because it's referred to this morning, and it is, in my view, an absolutely fundamentally critical point. And it's that the international system has changed diametrically. This is not a small change, what has occurred with the growing power of the United States. It is now probably, for the first time since Rome, have we had one state which has had so much power in so many areas. And the issue for all of us, but in particularly, most particularly Americans, but Canadians right behind because they are our neighbors. The United States has the power of Rome. Will it also give in to the hubris of Rome by trying to seek an imperial mission? And much of the issue for the next century will be this choice that Americans make about themselves. So we are not bystanders to this choice. We can have an influence. And it is not a sure thing which way Americans will go. I spend time in my paper looking at the history of American foreign policy. And isolationism was the lodestar for American foreign policy through most of their history. Right behind it is unilateralism, as we are seeing today. The Monroe Doctrine was 1823. That was a unilateral declaration that the Americas will be ours, not Europe. So unilateralism has been a strong part of their philosophy. But more importantly, since Woodrow Wilson and Roosevelt, liberal internationalism has been a predominant foreign policy philosophy of the United States. And liberal internationalism is now contending not with isolationism, but with unilateralism. And the unilateralists are winning some innings at the present, but it doesn't mean that they have to win the whole ballgame. And so I see us in our generation with Canadians adhering to the value frame of human security or liberal internationalism, the legacy of Mr. Pearson, as doing what we can to try to influence that American debate so that the liberal internationalists can succeed in that country not to be unraveled. It's exactly the same issue that Pearson, Bryn Bevan, and John Monet and others had after World War II, which was to persuade the United States to have a liberal international approach and not an isolationist approach. We are exactly in that same kind of historical juncture. Now, easy thing to say, what can we then do about it? And my prescription, both internationally and domestically, is the same. And that is that Canada has to make a major third investment in capacity, or the how-to, in order to have any chance of influencing America, or providing a counterweight or a counter-example on the way to organize the international system. And my prescription for the international system is the same as domestically. Major investment. We need major investment across the sphere of power resources in international affairs, diplomacy. Much discussion I last had about the use of the internet. Nathan mentioned a little program called Yearfleet. It's like illustration, different. Linking up Canadian high school students with students around the world, and with an idea that we should link our high school students directly on a series of current issues, particularly with Americans, kids in Texas and North Carolina, and use the net to have that people-to-people interaction. Exactly the kind of use of how to use this new technology to try to have some human understanding beyond the strictures of old-fashioned diplomacy. Well, one innovative foreign minister supported that. He's gone. It's gone. And it just happens that you need activists who can push the system. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow, Tom Kent and others. But in my general thesis is that the capacity in foreign aid and in military capability and peacekeeping, even 34 in peacekeeping, that's a long ways away from Mr. Pearson's idea. We're writing in the regular procedure or wherever it is. I mean, this is such a country is radically undershooting the influence that we could have. And I don't think Canadians want that. I think they want to have the multipolar, liberal international world. But as I was talking with some of the delegates over lunch, if he had another Rwanda crisis coming up, and the UN came desperately to Canada to put 2,500 or 5,000 people with Romeo Dallaire needed in Rwanda and Burundi, we wouldn't be able to do it. We would have to say, no, we can't. I have to follow the position we in. The same thing on failed states and the plethora of interesting ideas that there is in city and in here in the NGO sector. There is no lack of ideas whatsoever. It's just lack of law. Even under instruction for years and years and years. We can double, as I recommend, the amount of resources that go into the international envelope, and even then we're only at the average of the international system. A doubling for us means we're just about average with everybody else. But that's a major increase in money. I mean, that is a major capacity increase. Secondly, different problems, same prescription in trying to maintain an independent sphere of North America economically and domestically. When Michael Phelps has just talked about tremendous difficulties facing us economically and with the corporate sector, my point is this, that we have had huge successes in macroeconomics in the last decade. There's been a tremendous national revival in solving the deficit problem. Canadians can solve a lot of problems that was not so long ago where people were talking about that the IMF would be knocking on our door, as Lloyd described, they knocked on the door of Mongolia. Well, they're not knocking on our door because we solved that problem. But there are a host of problems that remain. We need to stand attention to the microeconomy that we showed to the macro in the 1990s. And that means to have that same kind of attention to the microeconomy, that we have to have thriving firms that can grow in the northern part of North America. There are many economists who do not believe that headquarters or global champions are important. William Watson is a very distinguished economist from McGill, John's old department. And I want to ask him, would there anything he had asked that he would not sell? He said, no, if I got a price range, sell them all. Well, I come from a different school, and that is that offices, companies are very important to us. They bring creativity. They bring masses of talent. They invest more in your home locale. They give young Canadians and others a chance to be decision makers, not because the decision implementers are somebody else. So we should have, if we want to thrive in the integrated economy of North America, we should have a host of firms that can do better here, not as little, but better here than they can anywhere else in North America. And we need public policy to give our firms a leg up, because the United States has so many locational advantages, the size of its market, and Mexico has so many advantages, the title force issue. So Canada has to run very hard to use our public policy to give us any kind of advantage in having thriving companies that can grow in this country. So we have been hollowing out the corporate infrastructure of Canada just as we have hollowed out the international affairs infrastructure in our aid program, in our military program. So we have a lot to do to invest in order to have a thriving corporate sector, which I think is the secret for giving Canadian economic choices in future generations. Now, the how-to, I believe, my approach, is investment over consumption. And this is what leads to difficulties in my third circle, which is support, or engaging Canadians in this quest. Because we've had a decade of sacrifices in dealing with the deficit. I'm calling for another decade of reduced chances for personal income cuts in this country compared to the United States in favor of public investment. I believe that we have to do the reverse of Ontario, Columbia, to cut taxes first and will make public investment greater. I want to turn that right around and make the public investment first and then have the tax reductions when we have those thriving, growing companies that I think we need in this country. And so what this means, I won't go over the several areas that I talked about that we need investment in. Other members of the panel will talk about, but we need investments in our cities, because that used to be one of our tremendous advantages, and we're slipping there. In the concept of a lifetime learning has been a cliche or a slogan. It hasn't been a policy. We need huge investments to encourage Canadians to train themselves. Companies should get deductions when they help Canadians save for individual training accounts. Laura will be talking about the role of higher education. The children's agenda, I'm sure, will come up tomorrow. If there is one silver bullet in Canadian public policy, it's certainly childhood education, I believe, and we have done very little there. We need a massive increase in national child benefit, but that's all expensive, that's all investment. And we need, in my view, without getting into detail, some of the points that Mike just raised, we need large and significant cuts in the cost of doing business in the country. And that's the cost for employers, that's carrying the UI, the employment system, because that's the tax on jobs, and generally to try to use the tax instrument to negate the locational advantages that there are in Mexico and in the United States. So I am calling for a very large investment program. This means a deferred tax cutting program. And that last part then, Mr. Chairman, needs to support. Can we persuade Canadians that we need the kind of investment in international policy I'm calling for, that we need the kind of investment in kids and cities and corporate tax cuts that I think we need? That will be hard. There is no doubt about that. There will be the neoconservative wing who want us to follow the American model of minimal social standards and great and reduced taxes. There's a second wing that wants us to follow the European model of integration, to adopt the American dollar, to adopt an American custom union. In fact, to give up the idea of having a Canadian advantage, or the Canadian way in North America, and simply accept immigration in all its forms. I'm calling for a very different course. That is, of course, a significant investment, collective investment, as opposed to more personal change in our genes. And it will take liberals a tremendous amount of articulation and communication to try to get that message across to Canada and to Canadians that it is not enough simply to have the values that we espouse internationally and socially, but we have to pay for them. An investment strategy needs money behind it. But I believe with public investment we can cite the Canadian advantage that we require if we are to have a thriving domestic sector in North America, and if we are to have any chance of being part of the international coalition, which will offer a different example than American unilateralism. We have to invest, we have to save, and we have to then defend those choices because it gets down to who pays. And that would be difficult. That is not an easy course. But with a decade more of investment, after the decade we have had in lowering inflation and curing the deficit problem, with a decade more of public investment in the areas I'm calling for, then I think we have a chance that our children also will have real choices about the good life.
Thank you very much. There were two things I noticed in your paper you did comment on. One is you want to do all of this without a return to deficit.
That's true.
And the other was you want to increase the defense budget in $12 billion.
I thought you might mention that, but I didn't really have to answer that.
That's right. Our next speaker is Lorna Marsden, who's been a very long time active Liberal, a senator for 8.5 years, and is currently president and vice chancellor of York University. Lorna?
Thanks very much, and thank you, Tom, and all the organizers. This week will take you back nearly 30 years for a ginger group of what were then younger Liberals, and a meeting in Montreal on a cold January morning. I'd been active as a paper on social policy, and I went on the bus to Montreal with my paper on those 5 practical steps to improve social policy, all typed up on there already. And the other paper that morning was given by a tall, handsome, impeccably coiffed Montrealer, and the paper was called The Puzzle of Civilization. This feels somewhat similar, and my paper is still more like 5 steps of social policy than it is about the puzzle of civilization. I'm going to assume that you all know that education, including higher education, is fundamental to liberalism, that you know that it underlies the capacity for individual choice and freedom. You've all read Max Weber. You all know that education in Canada is constitutionally messy between the Fed and the provinces. And more importantly, I hope you all know that we have been sliding away from small-L liberal provisions in education, most recently with the rise of religiously directed institutions and government policy that promote religiously narrow curricula in publicly supported institutions, away from opportunities for all qualified students having a chance to take a crack at higher education, away from excellence toward elitism, and that we have combined all of this in somewhat of a sentimental view of what is required to students, for researchers, and for institutions. Now, having said this, those government of Canada has done brilliantly for universities in the last few years, beginning with the Millennium Fund and other fundings for improving access to students, going on to faculty renewal in the Canada Research Chair, and in addition in support for the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, the CHRI, and in the most recent budget and best of all, support for the indirect costs of research. This is really quite remarkably good. The innovation agenda, which comes from Industries Canada and HRDC, is a fine, fine policy, and I fervently hope it's realized. And I urge all of you to look at the website and keep looking at it, and the reference to it is in my paper. It is a very positive climate in the context of the last 2 decades for university students and colleges on the need for research in our institutions. But as one of my former professors at Princeton said to us darkly during the Vietnam War, good intentions randomized behavior. And some of the policies I just mentioned have gone off the liberal track in their application. And one in particular is, in my view, taking us in entirely the wrong direction and needs to be corrected. So in the good intentions randomized behavior department, let me talk a little bit about students and their situation. Most of the students you meet, and this weekend is the university's recruitment fair down at the convention center, and already I went down there last time. There's been about 120,000 high school students through, where every university has a booth and so on. You talk to thousands of people who are intending to come to the university, and they are preoccupied about getting into the program. If they want to be in economics or environmental study, that is their preoccupation. And they will discuss, if you like, when they are in universities, diversities, or otherwise, of their professors. And certainly for those of us who work in these institutions, the student lifestyles are easily the most fascinating thing about them. But if you spend an evening with the websites of organized students associations in this country, you will see they are focused entirely on one matter, and that is money. And they are universally condemnatory of governments at all levels for raising the cost of higher education, and they give you sometimes the data and always the views that the majority of students are permanently loaded with debt. Well, there's absolutely no question at all that a cost of higher education to the student, to the province, to the federal talkers, and to the taxpayers needs serious attention and some solution. But from the public policy point of view, however, I think there's a more important question, and that is this. What sort of internationally competitive and locally useful education are students being offered in our colleges and universities for the dollars spent? For if our graduates are so well equipped that they graduate into the best positions in the labor force in graduate schools and professional programs anywhere in the world, then the question of the cost of it is one thing. If, on the other hand, they're graduating with an education that is not internationally competitive, then it's really quite another. And how do you know? How is a student, or indeed the parents of that student, to know? In a country where the only public rankings are those in the Queen's magazine, which does not and never intended to give quality indicators of the university experience, we have a really serious problem. The Cranes is about consumer choice and lifestyle. In every university and college, some programs are better than others, and furthermore, programs change, faculty members move, research funding moves on, departmental choices are made, and students actually go to programs more than they do to a particular institution. And employers, graduate and professional schools judge program performance more than institutions, much as those of us in the institutions would like to believe otherwise. In the USA, graduate programs and many undergraduate programs are assessed and they are ranked frequently by subject disciplines. And here I'm talking to program assessments and rankings and not to accreditation. Those who carry out these rankings, the National Research Council and others, keep a close eye on who's teaching where, the research, the publications emanating from the department, etc., and the graduate students who are associated with the department. Research funding employers and the informed public are really very well served by such rankings. In the UK, research rankings were imposed during the Thatcher years, and they've evolved into a ranking scheme that certainly has its critics and downsides and its distortions, but it's really focused the attention of universities on what they were doing and why. And in Europe, rankings of programs are an increasingly important part of the landscape. In this province, all graduate programs are assessed for quality on a regular cycle through the Ontario Centre for Graduate Study, but then the programs are categorized. They're acceptable, they're good, or they're not. But these results are not made public. They are sent in sealed envelopes to presidents of universities. You look at them and don't do anybody else. In Ontario, undergraduate programs are also being reviewed in a similar manner. And this province is the lead in this country. These reviews are not about student satisfaction, although of course that is one element, but they are peer reviews which examine the faculty, the department, the institutional support, the planning, the research, and the publications. Now, how does such rankings help students? When they're of a public nature, they help students understand where they might apply in order to enter the most competitive program at any major subject. They can get the lifestyle paid elsewhere. They'll help students explain to their pals why it's important to get into a particular program and not into a particular university. If costs vary by program, then of course so should scholarship and bursary support. If universities know that some of their programs are highly ranked and others less so, they will put their resources to a one or another policy. They'll either pull up all the programs to the highest standard, or they'll focus on their strengths. But in such a situation, they will focus their attention on attracting and keeping the very best faculty and students. So in my mind, the initial step in tackling this very important question of the cost of higher education is such ranking data. And to collect it on a valid and reliable basis, you need in Canada an independent, highly qualified body of individuals who provide an assessment of the academic quality of programs in every one of the 96 universities and university colleges that are now members of the Association of Universities and Colleges in Canada, all publicly supported. Equally, you need to plan for technical and polytechnical institutions. The embryos of such assessments exist, and I think we can get them, but this project needs the subscription of the federal and all the provincial governments and all the universities. And I don't think it should be a government program, but a peer-reviewed one. But it will certainly take public policy leadership to make it happen. And then it will be so much easier to address this question of the costs and the funding to students. Now, let me turn then to the other major points that I make in my paper. And it comes out of last December again in Montreal, the eminent French sociologist and Charlene signed the meeting of the deans of all graduate schools of Canada, and some of us were there, by declaring, this coming from a leading French intellectual, that all the important universities in the world are in the United States. There are, he said, about a dozen major universities in the world, and it is to know they're important because all the very best minds and researchers so they'll graduate from there or work in them. And with the possible exception of Cambridge, they're all in the U.S. And this, of course, stunned us all. In the post-war period, Americans have focused their considerable public and private influence and resources on building outstanding, exciting places of learning that influence governments, private sector organizations, and international institutions everywhere. They've also built out an amazing range of other institutions that are less influential but highly successful. And given what is often seen as the U.S. isolationist sentiment, U.S. universities draw by far the largest proportion of all foreign students that go anywhere beyond their home country, and they in turn influence world institutions and leaders throughout the world. Of course, to a Canadian audience, and all of us committed to building our own universities, this is very distressing, but it has a ring of truth because we all try to hire and retain faculty in a variety of fields only to have the brightest exit to Harvard, Stanford, Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And then we all try to hire graduates from these top 10 or 20 universities, and we're very pleased when our graduates get accepted into their graduate programming, and all of our lists our sabbaticals for our conferences and association with the outstanding institution. Now, there are some people in Canada who believe that we should try to mimic this U.S. system, putting all our resources into a few institutions and building in this country the U.S.-style tiered system in colleges. Others believe that the tradition in this country of building access to a very good quality of education in the across the country is a greatest hope for opportunity of young Canadians. And what I think is a key debate. It's sometimes, in more recently, called the pure peanut butter problem. And the argument of this group of people is that we spread our dollars too thinly and evenly across the country, and therefore we don't get excellence anywhere. Those who argue the peanut butter side of the argument generally believe that research funds should be concentrated in a few so-called research-intensive institutions, usually their own. And they argue, with no evidence that I can find or have seen, that some institutions are excellent in every way, and if that happens, this country will be more competitive. I think it is absolute rubbish. This is, the same kind of argument that is advanced during my trip to the Senate by the then government that argued that social programs should be confined to those, quote, most in need. That is, you should pour all your resources into the small group and somehow or other that's what's going to help. It has an immediate sort of hot button appeal, but it abandons the basic fundamental liberal beliefs that individual human beings working in teams or groups or even institutions, but individuals are making choices. It is not institutions that are creative or innovative. Universities don't do well at Monte, research even students, and indeed researchers do well in garages and basements. for that matter. Throughout this country, there are researchers in particular areas doing extremely important work, but there's no university in this country in which all researchers in all disciplines are doing extremely important work. So the key to research success in liberal terms is to support those individuals' research teams or labs that are doing work that's excellent, either in international or in Canadian directed terms. So the Canada Research Chair, the brilliant idea to repatriate Canadian faculty and improve research are an operationalization problem, an issue. That is, the funds are distributed according to those universities that get the most money from the granting council. And of course, those universities that get the most money from the granting council have medicine, dentistry, and all the extensive programs. The vast majority of students and faculty are not in those areas, and yet there's a distortion occurring, not from the intent of the policy, but from the actual application. And in my opinion, this is elitism and not the pursuit of good quality. So let me conclude. I'm against peanut butter. I'm in favor of honey. Attract the smartest bees to the honey and just don't bother building the hive. And I realize that for a president of the university to say this may be against my interest, but I truly believe we've got to get away from the incipient elitism that underlies this policy. If we're going to compete internationally and really build our capacity, we have to find a means to deliver this education in a liberal context, fundamentally important to the free person and those free and brilliant minds that are found in every part of this country, in every institution of higher education, and not just the ones with the best lobbying power.
You have been listening to The Life of a Servant, a Dennis Mills podcast. Visit dennismills.com for more information and archived episodes of this program.